Hello, everyone. It's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive. And today, like we did last set, I am joined by Chaz. How's it going, Chaz?
How's it going? Hello, everyone. It's
And
awesome to be back.
it's awesome to have you back. I had a lot of fun doing this last time, so I'm glad you managed to make a little bit of time to do it again.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be really fun. Really, really fun set.
So, for the next few days, we're going to be posting a video a day doing a complete set review of Eldritch Moon. So, we're going to start off with the multicolor cards, and then for one each day for the next week, we'll have a different color, and we're going to go through every rare and mythic in the set and just kind of break it down, some thoughts on it, how good or bad they are, how playable they may or may not be. So we're going to start off today with some of the most exciting cards in the set, the multicolored cards. So our first card of our Eldritch Moon set review is Gisa and Geralf. So Chaz, what do you think about the human wizard that likes zombies?
Yeah, it's really interesting that they sort of took these two individual characters and I guess melded them into one card without actually having to meld them. So that was interesting. I think everyone is generally receiving this card well, and I guess for good reason. You get kind of both of what each card was doing individually onto one card, and I think that's what makes this card so successful. And I know you and I have talked about this a lot on, if anyone listens to the podcast, about how good Delirium will end up after the Innistrad block 2.0 is kind of wrapped up, and now we can look at this and see that there's some really good enablers, and obviously Gisa and Geralf are one of them, and I'd say it rivals some of the better Delirium enablers we've seen, even as much as Mind Rack Demon from Shadows over Innistrad.
Yeah, I think it's a decent delirium enabler. It also obviously likes to be in a zombie deck. I'm still really torn on whether zombies as a tribe are going to be good enough to be tier 1 and standard. They're really sweet, and I plan on trying them, but I'm still not 100% sold that they got enough to really be a good deck. The other upside of this card is it's pretty sweet in Commander. It is a legendary creature, so you can play it as your commander, and it has a pretty sweet ability when you can cast it repeatedly, like you can with Commander, because every time you cast it, you get that enter the battlefield trigger, get some more stuff in your graveyard, and being able to cast a zombie from your graveyard each turn is pretty sweet. It's a decent ability, so I'm not completely sold in standard, but I do like the card.
Yeah, I agree with you there. Obviously, this gets a lot better, like you said, Seth, in Commander when you have a wide range of zombies from all across Magic the Gathering. Issue is like some of the really good zombies reanimate themselves already, so I don't know how much upside there is on that end, but I mean, if there's no other way to reanimate them, obviously you have Gisa and Geralf to fill in those gaps.
Yeah, I think there's a shot that it shows up, assuming there is a zombie deck that's playable in standard, that it shows up as like a one of, maybe a two of on the top end. I don't think it's a card you really want four of since it's legendary, so you don't really want to draw more than one of this card. So that would be my guess. If zombie decks are blue, you might play this as a one of to kind of like close out the game by getting back some stuff that died early in the game. But I think that might be the ceiling for the card in standard. Up next we have Grim Flayer, so the Delirium mythic for the set. So Chaz, what are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's really strong. Now, I understand in current standard there's some roadblocks that may stop Grim Flayer from being even more insane. Obviously, you have cards like Sylvan Advocate that are going to contend with Grim Flayer. Some people obviously already talking about if Grim Flayer can even just be straight up better than Sylvan Advocate in the decks that want to use Grim Flayer. So that is kind of a concern when talking about this card right away. But obviously, if things rotate or if there are interactions that can enable Grim Flayer to get past those cards, like one of the cards we'll talk about later in the series in black when we talk about Liliana, this can actually be quite potent.
Yeah, this card, I really want to like it. I like the design, and I think it's super powerful, but I'm afraid that for some of the reasons you mentioned, primarily Sylvan Advocate, that it's going to sit on the sidelines for a while, and I'm just not sure it's in a place where it's going to be playable in Standard, which is really sad because a 2-drop that can become a 4/4 with trample that lets you not only fill your graveyard but kind of improve your draws. It's almost like you get to scry 3 when you deal damage with this,
Right.
because you
Yeah.
get to leave your best card on top and you get to fill your graveyard. So it does a ton of things and it's really powerful. I'm just afraid that it's going to get stonewalled by Sylvan Advocate and people are not going to play it because of that.
Yeah, that's a legitimate concern, and I think that's really the concern everyone has. Luckily, on curve for your 3-drop is Liliana, which powers down their Sylvan Advocate, so maybe that's just good enough in and of itself to warrant playing the Grim Flayer to curve into that. But like I said, obviously the concern is there for Sylvan Advocate just stonewalling this all day, and just some other creatures as well before it gets powered up.
The good news is, though, all it really takes is maybe 1 or 2 hits, and you're definitely getting your investment back for a 2-mana creature. Up next, we have one of the most exciting cards in the set. This is Tamiyo Field Researcher, the new Bant-colored Planeswalker. So is this card busted, Chaz, or is this card busted?
It's really good. I've heard some players discuss that they don't really like this card. I don't know why. I think this is the first Bant Planeswalker, right?
I believe so.
I'm pretty sure. And I keep looking back at the cards around this card, and that's kind of what you have to do when you evaluate new cards. And it just seems so easy to splash for Tamiyo in so many different decks, especially when you have access to Oath of Nissa, which makes it extremely easy to cast Tamiyo. Even if you don't play blue, you don't really have to play any one of the single colors other than green to play Tamiyo. So that, I think that in and of itself is just a green light to play Tamiyo in already existing decks. There's already a Bant deck that could potentially play this. Green-white tokens probably doesn't have to add that many more resources to splash for this. And just every single ability just has merit. It protects itself, it gains card advantage, and its ultimate is essentially one of the 2 most powerful cards in Magic history, Ancestral Recall and Omniscience in one ability. So if Omniscience wasn't good enough, you get an Ancestral Recall in addition to that, and that just seems absurd to me.
Yeah, I mean, Omniscience is super good, so it might be worth playing the Doubling Season combo in something like Modern. Just for that, you're getting a 10-mana card plus an Ancestral Recall for 4 mana if you have a Doubling Season. In Standard, I think the card is really good. Every one of the abilities is just super powerful. It generates card advantage. It protects itself. It seems really insane. My 2 concerns with Tamiyo are, one I've mentioned before on the podcast. We've been burned by tricolor planeswalkers in the past, not being as good as we think. I believe that Tamiyo is good enough that it can break that mold and be very strong. The other concern I have is it's in this weird spot on the curve. If you're green-white tokens, for example, can you really play Tamiyo and Gideon? And if not, is there any way that Tamiyo is actually better than Gideon in a deck like green-white tokens or some of those similar decks? So I'm not sure on that. That would be my only other concern that might keep her from being as heavily played until Gideon rotates. But all around, this is an extremely powerful Planeswalker. Up next, we have maybe the most disappointing card in the set, Ulrich of the Krallenhorde.
The Krallenhorde, yeah. Ulrich of the Krallenhorde, and I can understand why you're disappointed. I tried to argue some merits of Ulrich on the podcast. If anyone tuned into that specific episode, it's fine, but I think they just could have went so many different directions with Ulrich, and I think the main concern with players that have waited for so long to have a legendary creature, like a legendary werewolf for their EDH decks, because that's really what this comes down to at the end of the day, is that everyone wanted this for EDH purposes. And I think they just kind of dropped the ball because it doesn't really solve the main issue of werewolves in EDH. And that really comes down to how werewolves can transform in a multiplayer game or just in general in EDH. And I think everyone was kind of looking to the legendary creature to alleviate those issues, and we just got a lot of generic abilities for what could have been a really awesome card.
Yeah, it's just not exciting. It's so bland and doesn't really have that much to do with werewolves itself, and it's okay. I don't think it really sees play in standard. There's probably some people that will still play it in commander just for flavor purposes. You want the werewolf general leading your werewolf deck, but it is very disappointing that a lot of people are saying they're still going to play Xenagos or Rurik Thar or some other green-red
Yeah.
creature in their werewolf deck just because Ulrich is so disappointing.
Yeah, and I think that's really the long and short of it. If there's already a debate about how they might not even switch to this general for their werewolf deck, I think that kind of seals the deal for Ulrich, and that's kind of disheartening because I think everyone was so excited to see this finally.
All right, so we're moving on from the mythics and into the multicolor rares. First one, Bloodhall Priest. So a interesting Flame Tongue Kavu madness thing, Shock
Yeah.
Tongue Kavu.
Yeah, this is kind of weird, but I think it's all right. Obviously, it's much better if you madness this creature. I think 2 damage is fine. That kills some amount of creatures in standard. I think if this has haste, it's a lot better because obviously you get the full effect of like a Flame Tongue Kavu. But again, I don't know if it stands up to a lot of other creatures on that curve, even if you do madness it.
The only thing I'll say for it, and I'm not sure it'll be standard playable, it is nice that it can hit the face and deal 2 damage to the
Yes.
face, but the only thing I'll say for it is Madness in general, I think, has gotten better because they printed some really good free discard outlets at the 2-drop slot in multiple colors. So it's going to be much easier to play a good card that allows you to discard a card like Bloodhall Priest without spending mana or like sacking your creature like Insolent Neonate or something. So Madness has gotten better. I don't know if that's going to be enough though to make Bloodhall Priest playable.
Yeah, I agree with you there.
One of the themes of the set is green, white, and humans in specific keep getting better. So of course they gave us a human lord, Heron's Grace Champion. What do you think about this one, Chaz?
What's not to like? It has flash, it has lifelink itself, and it's an anthem for a turn that also gives lifelink. I think that just is kind of a really great care package for a human list if you decide to play green. It is the game day promo as well, and I think both versions look really sweet, and I could see this being played in standard.
Yeah, I think it's really powerful, but I think you hit on something. There's a real question, not only to if humans want to go into green, which so far they haven't, but also if humans want to be playing 4-drops. So far,
Yeah.
humans deck has been pretty low to the ground, and it might take putting additional lands in their deck and kind of rebuilding a little bit. But it could be good, and if you want to build a humans deck to go a little bit above the really low to the ground red-white humans deck, white-green might be the way to go, and that's going to really swing a race. If you play a bunch of like curve-out white creatures, Thalia's Lieutenant, and then you play this on turn 4 and give everyone +1/+1 in lifelink, that's going to, I can't even imagine how much that's going to swing the race in an aggro mirror. Like one big attack with that lifelink anthem effect is probably going to potentially win you the game.
Yeah, I think you're onto something. It for sure. That's kind of where my mind went to is a mirror breaker. Like you said, if you decide to go green when you're playing humans, that could just be a version that preys on other human lists or just other aggressive lists in general, because you have this really awesome combat trick that will put you ahead if you're in a race scenario where you're racing. I think it's really great. And the signals that you can kind of send with Heron's Grace Champion is great too. If you leave up 4 mana at any point during the game, you can send a signal that you may have one and it may alter your opponent's lines of play. So I think it's a great niche card that can come out of the sideboard, or maybe be played as a one of or something in a main deck.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, speaking of leaving up mana in cards you can flash in,
Oh my goodness.
our last multicolor rare might be one of the most powerful rares in the whole set, in my
Yeah.
opinion. This is Spell Queller, the 3 mana Oblivion Ring on a stick. So, Chaz, what do you think?
What can't this card do? Right? And we were talking, I think it was you and I that have really talked about how much we loved Rattle Chains in the previous Innistrad set review, and there weren't just that many spirits to play around with Rattle Chains and all the other spirits. Well, we definitely got one of them so far, and this thing is insane. And I just, with a standard still containing Collected Company, I don't know how you beat that deck anymore.
Yeah,
I really don't. And just the sick interaction of being able to Collected Company. I don't know how many times you would want to do this, but you could Spell Queller your own Collected Company.
Wow, yeah, that.
Yeah, so I just don't know how many time walks they decided to want to throw into Collected Company. It's really insane.
Yeah, this card is. It is so good. And you mentioned Collected Company. I think it's good there. I'm also just super excited for a blue-white Spirits deck. I think
Yeah.
you can build a Spirits deck that is somewhat like the old Fairies deck, where you can play
Right.
completely on your opponent's turn with these flash creatures. Rattle Chains is already seeing play just because a 2/1 flash flyer is good, and it'll be way better with other spirits. Plus, they gave us the Spirit Curse Catcher, which we'll talk about when we get to the blue cards.
Yep.
So I think that blue-white Spirits might have legs to be a tier 1 standard deck.
Yeah, like you said, I think you just nailed it. There was already a shell of this kind of blue-white flash list, and I think they got plenty more pieces where they can completely play on your opponent's turn, have this really awesome tempo style, and just they have so many tools now. They have Spell Queller, obviously, and a few other creatures, like you said, we'll mention in later videos, but this just seems amazing. There's so many interactions with Collected Company. It makes a spirit deck pretty viable now that we've seen the full set spoiler, or the full set, and we will talk about that more, like I said, in other videos. But I mean, Spell Queller is just insane.
I agree with you. I think it is one of the best cards in the set. So.
Yeah, probably. I would agree with you. There's not much better, and it's at rare, so it's really powerful.
Well, that wraps up our discussion of the multicolor rares and mythics from Eldritch Moon. So, Chaz, on the way out the door today, what is your favorite multicolor card from the set?
As much as I like Golgari and green cards, I would say Grim Flayer, but I have to go with Spell Queller just for the sheer amount of power and just interactions already presented. Just like I said, with Collected Company, with other spirits, having that core of spirits for like this weird tempo list with Rattle Chains, even Dimensional Infiltrator. I just have to go with Spell Queller.
Well, you kind of stole my thunder, but I'm going
Yeah.
with Spell Queller as well. That card, like, there's a lot of good multicolor cards, some for Commander, some for Standard, but that's just, oh man, it is so good, and I'm very excited to build the Spirits list. That's the first deck I'm going to build once I get access to the Eldritch Moon cards. I just can't wait to put it together because it looks really competitive, and I think it's going to be a ton of fun to play.
I don't blame you. I wholeheartedly agree.
All right, well, that is our multicolor set review. Chaz and I will be back tomorrow to break down all the black cards from Eldritch Moon. So, Chaz, thanks for hanging out. I will talk to you tomorrow.
Anytime. It was a blast. Thanks, everyone, for joining us.